know that you want to talk to us in more detail about zombie knives, and we've been chatting about that in the office this morning. What is Labour actually going to do to get these off the streets?
Well, we need a much stronger ban than the government is proposing. They've announced these proposals about 16 times before. 6 different Home Secretaries have said they'll get zombie knives off the street. We need a much broader ban, so it's got to include things like the ninja swords and other dangerous weapons as well. And there's got to be stronger penalties for the online marketplaces who are still profiting from the sale of illegal knives. We want a broader review that looks at the whole process of the way in which these knives are being bought. There's not proper checks for age as well. We've got to have stronger action. This is dangerous, and there's been a 70% increase in knife crime in the last 8 years. There's got to be action.
We will be hearing from a mum in just a few moments' time who lost her son to knife crime. Talking to her, when would you tell her, when would Labour be able to have these knives made illegal and off the streets?
Well, we would like the government to act even before the general election. We will support them to do so. We shouldn't be waiting for a general election. We would want to do so as swiftly as possible after a general election if Labour is elected. But we also see this as part of a wider action plan. Labour's setting out an action plan today on knife crime, which includes not just the action on the knife sales, but also action on gangs that are ending up dragging young people into crime. It includes stronger action, including mandatory referrals to youth offending teams for young people who are starting to get drawn into knife crime, and a major new youth prevention programme with community hubs, additional youth workers, mental health workers, that's based on some of the work that we did on Sure Start in the last Labour government, and applying that now to our teenagers to give them part of a better future, a new Young Futures programme to prevent knife crime as well.
Feel about concerns over terrorism risks at the planned Holocaust memorial for basically what is the back garden of the House of Commons, just across from where I'm sitting now?
Well, I strongly support the proposals for the new Holocaust memorial. So does the Labour Party. I think it's right that we have something that means that we can have future generations can learn. The survivors of the Holocaust now, there are many survivors, are very elderly. It's really important that we never forget the darkness into which Europe fell, the genocide that happened, and that we have that memorial and those lessons for the future. I think this is a good location for it. It's next to Parliament. It's next to the heart of our democracy. We have to stand firm against terror threats of all kinds. There are obviously ongoing concerns about all kinds of, whether that be counter-terror threats, whether that be other sorts of national security threats, that we have to have a firm response to wherever those threats take place.
And you would be content for it no longer to be a park that Londoners and tourists can enter without having to worry about security concerns?
Well, this is a programme that Labour supports, because I think you have to have a really iconic location and building in order to recognise the seriousness, the devastation that was caused by the Holocaust and the impact that it has had through the years and through the generations. So that's why this is something that we support and that the government strongly supports. I think this is a cross-party issue, to have everybody coming together supporting this and to make sure it can happen. It's been planned for a long time, and I really hope that people will come together and support this so that we could recognise that terrible chapter in history.
A thought that we're hearing, and a comment from you would be most helpful, please, Shadow Home Secretary. British homes should be for British workers. What do you make of reports that the government is looking at a scheme to give British citizens faster access to social housing?
Well, I think there's going to be a briefing report. I think we've seen those sorts of stories. They repeat them repeatedly, and they seem to be promising people homes that actually don't exist because they're not building social housing that the nation needs. And also there are already restrictions and have been in place for a long time, not just for local residents, but also for people who are either British citizens who have long-term residence rights in this country. So it's not really clear what the government's saying. It looks like like just more briefing and stories, just the same as they've done before, really.
Would you
headlines.
support a suggestion that British citizens should be top of the list?
Well, there are already provisions, in fact there have been for around 14 years, that mean that social housing providers can give priority to local residents, to those with a connection to the area, and there's already all sorts of restrictions in place, which means that social housing is for those who are British citizens and have long-term residence rights in the UK. So, I think this is one of those things, it's like one of those deliberate headline chasing stories that unfortunately the government does from time to time, really to distract from the fact that they're not actually building social housing that we need. They're not tackling the problems the country's facing, whether that is the rise in knife crime, whether that is the broken public services, the state of our National Health Service. We need a proper debate about the future of our country, a proper plan for the future of the country, rather than the chaos that we're just getting from the Conservatives at the moment.
It's freezing where you are. Is it cold in Milton Keynes this morning?
It's quite windy. It's nippy this morning. It is nippy, but it's quite windy. We're here in Milton Keynes because we're actually having a meeting with the police later on and with some of the youth organisations who are working to tackle knife crime, about what more can be done, because we've got to get local organisations involved. You've got to get all those community groups working with the police, working with councils and agencies in order to tackle this. It's so serious.
OK, good to see you as always, Ms Cooper. Thanks for taking the time.
Good to see you, Kate.